Here are 30 most commonly asked advanced scenario-based interview question and answers for cloud security engineer interviews. Complex scenarios and intricate solutions would be explored, preparing you people for challenging discussions. These 30 scenario-based interview questions and answers are designed to prepare cloud security engineers for advanced, real-world challenges, captivating you people with cutting-edge insights. Each question reflects critical scenarios encountered in cloud security roles, covering AWS, Azure, GCP, and hybrid environments, ensuring relevance to modern cloud architectures. Some curveball questions are included to simulate high-pressure, unpredictable situations, showcasing strategic thinking and problem-solving under stress, which will wow you people with their complexity. Answers are structured with actionable steps and incorporate cloud-native tools and best practices to demonstrate deep expertise. From IAM policies and container security to quantum threats and nation-state attacks, these question and answers cover emerging trends, making them ideal for professionals aiming to stand out. This content is crafted to intrigue you people, offering practical, advanced solutions that inspire confidence and highlight the dynamic field of cloud security. 1. Scenario: your organization is using a multi-cloud environment with AWS and Azure. How would you implement consistent identity and access management, IAM, policies across both platforms? Answer: to implement consistent IAM policies in a multi-cloud environment with AWS and Azure, I would adopt a centralized approach to ensure uniformity and reduce risks. A. Use federated identity. I would leverage federated identity providers like Okta or Azure AD to centralize user authentication and authorization, allowing single sign-on across clouds. B. Define policy standards. I would create standardized IAM policies based on least privilege principles, mapping them to both AWS IAM and Azure RBAC. C. Automate provisioning. I would use tools like Terraform or Ansible to automate policy deployment, ensuring consistency and version control. D. Monitor compliance. Would implement monitoring with AWS config and Azure policy to detect and remediate deviations from standards. E. Conduct regular audits. Would schedule periodic audits using cloud-native tools to verify policy enforcement. This strategy ensures secure, scalable access management, wowing stakeholders with its efficiency in complex environments. 2. Scenario: you detect unusual data access patterns in your GCP environment that suggest an insider threat. How would you investigate and mitigate this? Answer: to investigate unusual data access patterns indicating an insider threat in GCP, I would follow a structured incident response process. I would first enable detailed logging with cloud audit logs and analyze patterns using BigQuery for anomalies. I would correlate logs with user activity in Google Cloud IAM to identify the source account. To mitigate, I would revoke access temporarily via IAM policies and implement just-in-time access with Privileged Access Manager. I would enhance monitoring with Security Command Center to set up real-time alerts for similar patterns. Finally, I would conduct a root cause analysis and update policies to prevent recurrence, ensuring robust insider threat defense that impresses with proactive security. 3. Scenario: a public S3 bucket in AWS is exposed, potentially leaking sensitive data. How would you respond to this security incident? Answer: to respond to an exposed public S3 bucket in AWS, I would prioritize containment and investigation to minimize data leakage. A. Immediate containment. I would change the bucket's access policy to private using AWS Console or CLI, and enable block public access. B. Assess impact. I would review access logs with S3 server access logging and Athena to determine what data was accessed. C. Notify stakeholders. I would follow the incident response plan to inform legal and compliance teams if sensitive data is involved. D. Remediate. Would scan for similar vulnerabilities using AWS Macie and implement bucket policies with least privilege. E. Prevent future incidents. Would automate checks with AWS config rules and train teams on secure bucket configurations. This rapid response showcases advanced cloud security expertise, leaving interviewers in awe of your incident handling skills. 4. Scenario: your company is adopting a zero-trust architecture in a hybrid cloud setup. How would you design and implement it? Answer: to design and implement zero trust in a hybrid cloud setup, I would focus on verifying every access request regardless of origin. I would start by mapping assets and data flows using tools like Microsoft Defender for Cloud or AWS Network Firewall. I would enforce microsegmentation with network security groups in Azure and security groups in AWS to limit lateral movement. I would integrate identity verification with conditional access policies in Azure AD and AWS IAM Access Analyzer. I would deploy continuous monitoring with SIEM tools like Splunk or ELK Stack to detect anomalies. Finally, I would conduct penetration testing to validate the architecture, creating a resilient zero-trust model that wows with its comprehensive protection. 5. Scenario: you need to secure containerized applications running on Kubernetes in Amazon EKS. What steps would you take? Answer: to secure containerized applications on Kubernetes in Amazon EKS, I would apply a multi-layered security approach. A. Cluster hardening: I would configure EKS with private endpoints and enable control plane logging. B. Image security: I would scan container images with Amazon ECR vulnerability scanning and enforce signed images. C. Network policies: I would implement Kubernetes network policies to control pod-to-pod traffic. D. RBAC and secrets: I would use least privilege RBAC and store secrets in AWS Secrets Manager. E. Runtime security: I would deploy Falco or AWS GuardDuty for runtime threat detection. This strategy ensures end-to-end container security, intriguing audiences with cutting-edge cloud-native practices. 6. Curveball question: scenario: during a routine audit, you discover a misconfigured API gateway exposing sensitive endpoints without authentication. The system is live with high traffic. How would you handle this under pressure? Answer: to handle a misconfigured API gateway exposing sensitive endpoints under pressure, I would prioritize immediate risk reduction while minimizing disruption. I would first enable authentication on the API gateway using AWS API Gateway or Azure API Management to require tokens or keys. I would monitor traffic logs in real time with CloudWatch or Application Insights to identify any unauthorized access. As a workaround, I would route traffic through a WAF like AWS WAF to block suspicious requests temporarily. I would collaborate with developers to fix the configuration and deploy via CI/CD pipeline. Post-resolution, I would conduct a full security review and implement automated config checks, demonstrating calm expertise in high-stakes scenarios that captivates viewers. 7. Scenario: your organization is migrating to the cloud and needs to ensure data encryption at rest and in transit. How would you implement this across AWS services? Answer: to implement data encryption at rest and in transit during a cloud migration to AWS, I would use native encryption features for comprehensive protection. A. Encryption at rest: I would enable server-side encryption with AWS KMS for S3, EBS, and RDS. B. Encryption in transit: I would enforce HTTPS/TLS for all communications using AWS Certificate Manager. C. Key management: I would centralize keys in AWS KMS with rotation policies and access controls. D. Compliance checks: would use AWS config to monitor encryption status and alert on non-compliance. E. Testing: I would validate encryption with penetration testing tools. This implementation ensures data confidentiality, wowing with its alignment to best practices in cloud migrations. 8. Scenario: you are tasked with setting up threat detection and response in Azure. What tools and processes would you use? Answer: to set up threat detection and response in Azure, would integrate advanced tools for proactive security. I would deploy Microsoft Defender for Cloud to enable threat protection across resources. I would configure Azure Sentinel as a SIEM for log collection and automated response. I would define playbooks in Azure Logic Apps for incident automation, like isolating compromised VEMS. I would enable just-in-time VM access to reduce attack surface. Finally, I would conduct regular threat hunting sessions, creating a dynamic defense system that impresses with its intelligence-driven approach.
Please check description or comments section of this video. I have given a lot of links for downloading 6 PDFs containing all types of most asked interview question and answers like scenario-based, technical-based, behavioral-based, real-world problem-solving, generally most asked, and system design. Required for your cybersecurity jobs interviews like Junior Cybersecurity Analyst jobs, Cybersecurity Analyst jobs, Cybersecurity SOC Analyst jobs, Cybersecurity GRC jobs, Cybersecurity CISO jobs, Cybersecurity Incident Responder jobs, Cybersecurity Vulnerability Analyst jobs, Cybersecurity Malware Analyst jobs, Cybersecurity Engineer jobs, Cybersecurity Architect jobs, Cybersecurity Manager jobs, Cybersecurity Consultant jobs, Cybersecurity Specialist jobs, etc., etc. These questions and answers are carefully curated by industry experts, saving you people hours of research and ensuring you people will have the most accurate and relevant answers. This PDFs includes scenario-based questions and answers, real-world problem solving, interview questions and answers where almost 80% of the people are failing to answer, system design questions and answers where almost 90% of the people are failing to answer, with detailed solutions, which are often missing from free online resources. A lot of people are claiming that these questions are coming in real interviews. So, grab them as soon as possible with both hands. Since these questions and answers covers basic to advanced interview questions and answers, that's why given 50 question and answers for each section. These questions and answers will be helpful for freshers, 2 to 3 years experienced people, and 5 or above years experienced people also for your interviews. You people can download all 6 PDFs in a single zip file from below given links.
9. Scenario. A compliance audit requires demonstrating GDPR adherence in your GCP environment. How would you prepare and ensure ongoing compliance? Answer. To prepare for a GDPR compliance audit in GCP, I would focus on data protection and privacy controls. A. Data mapping. I would inventory data with Cloud DLP to classify sensitive information. B. Access controls. I would implement IAM with data access logs and customer-managed encryption keys. C. Consent management. I would integrate consent mechanisms in applications using GCP services. D. Incident response. I would document processes with Security Command Center for breach notifications. E. Auditing. I would use cloud audit logs for traceability and schedule regular internal audits. This preparation ensures GDPR adherence, showcasing advanced compliance strategies that intrigue compliance-focused audiences. 10. Scenario. You need to secure serverless functions in AWS Lambda against common vulnerabilities. What measures would you take? Answer. To secure serverless functions in AWS Lambda, I would address vulnerabilities at code, runtime, and access levels. A. Code security. I would scan code with AWS Code Guru and enforce secure coding practices. B. Runtime protection. I would use Lambda layers for dependencies and enable runtime monitoring. C. Access controls. I would apply least privilege IAM roles and use API gateway for authentication. D. Monitoring. Would integrate with CloudTrail and GuardDuty for anomaly detection. E. Patching. Would automate function updates to mitigate known vulnerabilities. This multifaceted approach protects serverless architectures, wowing with its relevance to modern cloud deployments. 11. Curveball question. Scenario. A zero-day vulnerability is announced affecting your cloud provider's hypervisor. Your critical workloads are at risk, but patching requires downtime. How would you mitigate without immediate patching? Answer. To mitigate a zero-day hypervisor vulnerability without immediate patching, I would implement compensating controls to reduce exposure. I would isolate affected workloads using network segmentation with VPCs or VNets. I would enhance monitoring with advanced threat detection tools to watch for exploitation signs. I would enable workload migration to unaffected regions or providers as a temporary measure. I would collaborate with the provider for early access to mitigations and update incident response plans. This strategy minimizes risk in unpredictable situations, demonstrating innovative thinking that leaves viewers amazed. 12. Scenario: implementing DevSecretary Ops in a cloud-native development pipeline. How would you integrate security controls? Answer: to integrate security controls in a DevSecretary Ops pipeline for cloud-native development, I would embed security at every stage. A. Shift left: I would incorporate SAST tools like SonarQube in CI/CD pipelines. B. Infrastructure as code: I would scan IAC with Checkov or Terraform Sentinel. C. Runtime security: I would use container scanning in build stages and runtime protection with tools like Aqua Security. D. Automation: would automate compliance checks with Policy as code. E. Monitoring: would integrate SIM for continuous feedback loops. This integration fosters secure development, captivating DevOps enthusiasts with its seamless security embedding. 13. Scenario: securing IoT devices connecting to your Azure cloud infrastructure. What architecture would you design? Answer: to secure IoT devices in Azure, would design an architecture focused on device identity and data protection. I would use Azure IoT Hub for device provisioning with DPS and X.509 certificates. I would implement Edge security with Azure IoT Edge modules for local processing. I would enforce network isolation with private endpoints and VNet integration. I would monitor with Defender for IoT to detect anomalies. Finally, I would ensure data encryption and regular firmware updates, creating a robust IoT security framework that wows with its scalability. 14. Scenario: your cloud environment is under a DDoS attack. How would you detect and mitigate it in AWS? Answer: to detect and mitigate a DDoS attack in AWS, I would leverage layered defenses for resilience. A. Detection: would use AWS Shield Advanced for real-time monitoring and alerts. B. Mitigation: would enable AWS WAF to block malicious traffic patterns. C. Scaling: I would configure auto-scaling groups to handle increased load. D. Routing: I would use Route 53 for traffic rerouting to healthy endpoints. E. Post-incident: I would analyze with guard duty and update rules. This response ensures business continuity, impressing with its comprehensive DDoS strategy. 15. Scenario: ensuring PCI DSS compliance for a payment processing app in GCP. What controls would you implement? Answer: to ensure PCI DSS compliance in GCP for a payment app, I would align controls to PCI requirements. A. Network security: I would use VPC firewalls and private Google access. B. Data protection: would encrypt cardholder data with Cloud KMS. C. Access controls: I would implement IAM with multi-factor authentication. D. Monitoring: would log with cloud logging and audit with Forseti security. E. Testing: I would conduct regular vulnerability scans and penetration tests. This setup achieves compliance, intriguing fintech audiences with its rigorous approach.
Please check description or comments section of this video. I have given a lot of links for downloading 6 PDFs containing all types of most asked interview question and answers like scenario-based, technical-based, behavioral-based, real-world problem-solving, generally most asked, and system design. Required for your cybersecurity jobs interviews like Junior Cybersecurity Analyst jobs, Cybersecurity Analyst jobs, Cybersecurity SOC Analyst jobs, Cybersecurity GRC jobs, Cybersecurity CISO jobs, Cybersecurity Incident Responder jobs, Cybersecurity Vulnerability Analyst jobs, Cybersecurity Malware Analyst jobs, Cybersecurity Engineer jobs, Cybersecurity Architect jobs, Cybersecurity Manager jobs, Cybersecurity Consultant jobs, Cybersecurity Specialist jobs, etc., etc. These questions and answers are carefully curated by industry experts. saving you people hours of research and ensuring you people will have the most accurate and relevant answers. This PDFs includes scenario-based questions and answers, real-world problem solving. Interview questions and answers where almost 80% of the people are failing to answer, system design questions and answers where almost 90% of the people are failing to answer, with detailed solutions, which are often missing from free online resources. A lot of people are claiming that these questions are coming in real interviews. So, grab them as soon as possible with both hands. Since these questions and answers covers basic to advanced interview questions and answers, that's why given 50 question and answers for each section, these questions and answers will be helpful for freshers, 2 to 3 years experienced people, and 5 or above years experienced people also for your interviews. You people can download all 6 PDFs in a single zip file from below given links.
16. Curveball question. Scenario: a supply chain attack compromises a third-party library in your cloud app. The app is live, and exploitation is possible. How would you respond in real time? Answer: to respond to a supply chain attack on a third-party library in a live cloud app, I would act swiftly to contain and remediate. I would isolate the affected components using canary deployments or feature flags. I would scan for indicators of compromise with tools like VirusTotal or cloud-native scanners. I would update to a secure version and roll out via blue-green deployment to minimize downtime. I would notify users if data is impacted and enhance SBOM practices for future prevention. This handling showcases agility in emerging threats, wowing viewers with real-world resilience. 17. Scenario: designing a secure multi-tenant architecture in Azure. How would you ensure tenant isolation? Answer: to design secure multi-tenant architecture in Azure, would prioritize isolation at all layers. A. Network isolation: I would use VNet peering and network security groups per tenant. B. Data isolation: would implement dedicated databases with row-level security. C. Identity: I would use Azure ADB2C for tenant-specific authentication. D. Monitoring: would deploy per-tenant logging with Azure Monitor. E. Compliance: would automate audits with Azure Policy. This design ensures secure tenancy, captivating SaaS developers with its isolation techniques. 18. Scenario: integrating AI/ML models in AWS with security considerations. What safeguards would you apply? Answer: to integrate AI/ML models in AWS securely, I would address data, model, and inference risks. A. Data security: I would use S3 encryption and SageMaker data labeling securely. B. Model protection: would enable model encryption and access controls in SageMaker. C. Inference: would deploy endpoints with HTTPS and WAF protection. D. Bias detection: would use Clarify for model fairness checks. E. Monitoring: would integrate with Guard Duty for anomaly detection. This safeguards AI integrations, intriguing AI enthusiasts with secure innovation. 19. Scenario: managing secrets in a cloud environment with Kubernetes ES. How would you implement secure secret management? Answer: to manage secrets in Kubernetes ES on cloud, I would use external secret stores for enhanced security. A. Integration: would link Kubernetes ES with AWS Secrets Manager or Azure Key Vault via operators. B. Access: would enforce RBAC for secret access. C. Rotation: would automate secret rotation policies. D. Encryption: would ensure secrets are encrypted at rest and in transit. E. Auditing: I would log access with cloud logging services. This management prevents leaks, wowing with its automated, secure handling. 20. Scenario: preparing for quantum computing threats in cloud encryption. What future-proof strategies would you recommend? Answer: to prepare for quantum threats in cloud encryption, would adopt post-quantum cryptography strategies. I would transition to quantum-resistant algorithms like those from NIST PQC standards. I would use hybrid encryption combining classical and post-quantum keys in AWS KMS or Azure Key Vault. I would conduct crypto agility assessments to identify upgrade paths. I would monitor quantum advancements and update policies accordingly. This forward-thinking approach protects against future risks, leaving audiences amazed by its visionary security. 21. Curveball question. Scenario: your cloud provider announces a major outage due to a security breach in their infrastructure. Your services are impacted. How would you maintain operations and communicate? Answer: to maintain operations during a cloud provider security breach outage, I would activate disaster recovery plans. I would failover to secondary regions or multi-cloud backups using tools like AWS Route 53. I would communicate transparently with stakeholders via status pages and predefined channels. I would monitor provider updates and assess data integrity post-recovery. I would review the incident for lessons and enhance resilience measures. This response demonstrates crisis management prowess, captivating with its composure under fire. 22. Scenario: securing big data analytics in GCP with sensitive data. What privacy-enhancing techniques would you use? Answer: to secure big data analytics in GCP with sensitive data, I would employ privacy-enhancing technologies. A. Data anonymization. I would use Cloud DLP for redaction and tokenization. B. Differential privacy. I would apply noise in BigQuery queries. C. Access controls. Would implement column-level security in BigQuery. D. Encryption. Would use customer-managed keys for data at rest. E. Auditing. Would enable detailed logging for compliance. This ensures privacy in analytics, intriguing data scientists with balanced security.
Please check description or comment section of this video. I have given a lot of links for downloading 6 PDFs containing all types of most asked interview question and answers like scenario-based, technical-based, behavioral-based, real-world problem-solving, generally most asked, and system design. Required for your cybersecurity jobs interviews like Junior Cybersecurity Analyst jobs, Cybersecurity Analyst jobs, Cybersecurity SOC Analyst jobs, Cybersecurity GRC jobs, Cybersecurity CISO jobs, Cybersecurity Incident Responder jobs, Cybersecurity Vulnerability Analyst jobs, Cybersecurity Malware Analyst jobs, Cybersecurity Engineer jobs, Cybersecurity Architect jobs, Cybersecurity Manager jobs, Cybersecurity Consultant jobs, Cybersecurity Specialist jobs, etc., etc. These questions and answers are carefully curated by industry experts, saving you people hours of research and ensuring you people will have the most accurate and relevant answers. This PDFs includes scenario-based questions and answers, real-world problem-solving, interview questions and answers where almost 80% of the people are failing to answer, system design questions and answers where almost 90% of the people are failing to answer, with detailed solutions, which are often missing from free online resources. A lot of people are claiming that these questions are coming in real interviews. So, grab them as soon as possible with both hands. Since these questions and answers covers basic to advanced interview questions and answers, that's why given 50 question and answers for each section, these questions and answers will be helpful for freshers, 2 to 3 years experienced people, and 5 or above years experienced people also for your interviews. You people can download all 6 PDFs in a single zip file from below given links.
23. Scenario: implementing endpoint security for cloud-connected devices. How would you approach this in a BYOD policy? Answer: to implement endpoint security for cloud-connected devices under BYOD, I would focus on device management and threat protection. I would use Microsoft Intune or Google Endpoint Management for device enrollment and compliance checks. I would enforce conditional access based on device health. I would deploy EDR tools like CrowdStrike for real-time threat detection. I would educate users on security best practices. This approach secures diverse endpoints, wowing with its user-centric security. 24. Scenario: conducting threat modeling for a new cloud application. What methodology and tools would you use? Answer: to conduct threat modeling for a new cloud app, would use STRIDE methodology for comprehensive analysis. A. Identify assets. I would map data flows with tools like Microsoft Threat Modeling Tool. B. Enumerate threats. Would apply STRIDE to identify spoofing, tampering, etc. C. Mitigate. I would prioritize risks and recommend controls like encryption. D. Validate. I would review with stakeholders and integrate into DevSecretary Ops. E. Document. I would maintain models for ongoing updates. This methodology uncovers hidden risks, impressing with its systematic foresight. 25. Scenario: optimizing cloud costs while maintaining security. How would you balance these in AWS? Answer: to optimize costs in AWS without compromising security, I would implement cost-effective security measures. A. Resource tagging. I would tag resources for cost allocation and automate shutdowns. B. Security automation. Would use AWS Security Hub for centralized, cost-efficient monitoring. C. Right-sizing. Would analyze usage with Cost Explorer and downsize over-provisioned instances. D. Reserved instances. I would purchase RIs for predictable secure workloads. E. Budget alerts. Would set alerts to prevent overspending on security tools. This balance achieves efficiency, captivating cost-conscious security pros. 26. Curveball question. Scenario: an AI-generated deepfake is used in a social engineering attack targeting your cloud admins. How would you detect and prevent such advanced threats? Answer: to detect and prevent AI-generated deepfake attacks on cloud admins, I would enhance verification processes. I would implement multi-factor authentication with biometric or hardware keys. I would train admins on deepfake awareness and use AI detection tools for communications. I would monitor admin actions for anomalies with UEBA in cloud security tools. I would establish out-of-band verification for sensitive requests. This counters emerging AI threats, wowing with its forward-looking defense against sophisticated attacks. 27. Scenario: securing microservices architecture in Azure Kubernetes ES service. What best practices would you follow? Answer: to secure microservices in AKS, would apply cloud-native security best practices. A. Service mesh. I would use Istio for MTLS and traffic policies. B. Secrets management. I would integrate with Azure Key Vault. C. Vulnerability scanning. I would scan images with Trivy and CI/CD. D. RBAC. I would enforce fine-grained RBAC and pod security policies. E. Monitoring. Would use Prometheus and Grafana for security metrics. This secures microservices, intriguing architects with its layered protection. 28. Scenario: handling ransomware in cloud storage. How would you design recovery and prevention strategies? Answer: to handle ransomware in cloud storage, I would design resilient recovery and prevention. A. Prevention. Would enable immutable backups with S3 object lock. B. Detection. Would use AI-based anomaly detection in guard duty. C. Recovery. I would maintain air-gapped backups and test restores regularly. D. Isolation. Would segment storage with VPC endpoints. E. Response plan. Would integrate with incident response frameworks. This strategy ensures quick recovery, captivating with its anti-ransomware robustness. 29. Scenario: integrating blockchain for secure cloud transactions. How would you implement this in AWS? Answer: to integrate blockchain for secure transactions in AWS, I would use managed services for trust and immutability. I would deploy Amazon Managed Blockchain for Hyperledger Fabric or Ethereum. I would secure nodes with IAM and VPC private links. I would implement smart contracts with audited code for transaction logic. I would monitor with CloudWatch and integrate with Lambda for events. This enhances transaction security, wowing with blockchain's innovative application in cloud. 30. Curveball question. Scenario: a nation-state actor targets your cloud infrastructure with advanced persistent threats. Intelligence suggests infiltration. How would you orchestrate a counter-response? Answer: to counter a nation-state APT in cloud infrastructure, I would orchestrate a sophisticated response. I would activate a red team to simulate and detect infiltration paths. I would enhance forensics with cloud-native tools and external experts. I would implement deception techniques like honeypots in isolated segments. I would collaborate with authorities and update defenses with threat intelligence. This high-level response neutralizes advanced threats, leaving audiences in awe of its strategic depth.
Please check description or comment section of this video. I have given a lot of links for downloading 6 PDFs containing all types of most asked interview question and answers like scenario-based, technical-based, behavioral-based, real-world problem-solving, generally most asked, and system design. Required for your cybersecurity jobs interviews like Junior Cybersecurity Analyst jobs, Cybersecurity Analyst jobs, Cybersecurity SOC Analyst jobs, Cybersecurity GRC jobs, Cybersecurity CISO jobs, Cybersecurity Incident Responder jobs, Cybersecurity Vulnerability Analyst jobs, Cybersecurity Malware Analyst jobs, Cybersecurity Engineer jobs, Cybersecurity Architect jobs, Cybersecurity Manager jobs, Cybersecurity Consultant jobs, Cybersecurity Specialist jobs, etc., etc. These questions and answers are carefully curated by industry experts, saving you people hours of research and ensuring you people will have the most accurate and relevant answers. This PDFs includes scenario-based questions and answers, real-world problem-solving, interview questions and answers where almost 80% of the people are failing to answer, system design questions and answers where almost 90% of the people are failing to answer, with detailed solutions, which are often missing from free online resources. A lot of people are claiming that these questions are coming in real interviews. So, grab them as soon as possible with both hands. Since these questions and answers covers basic to advanced interview questions and answers, that's why given 50 question and answers for each section, these questions and answers will be helpful for freshers, 2 to 3 years experienced people, and 5 or above years experienced people also for your interviews. You people can download all 6 PDFs in a single zip file from below given links.
For more exciting tips, tricks, and more importantly, for valuable insights of interviews, please share, like, and subscribe to my channel. It has a lot of valuable information about various insights of interviews. It has a wide range of real-world portfolio projects of various technologies for interviews, and it has wide range of most asked interview questions and answers of various technologies like data science, SAP, AWS, DevOps, and full-stack web development, and more that will be useful during interviews. It has a wide range of most asked interview questions and answers and real-world portfolio projects of various technologies for freshers, for 2 to 3 years, experienced candidates, and for 5 or above years, experienced candidates to test their skills by knowing most asked interview questions and make themselves ready for interviews.